Spring practice is right around the corner for the Louisville football team. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're discussing 5 offensive players that could benefit the most from a strong showing in the spring. So with that being said, stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making this your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. February is literally a couple days away. Spring practice is just around the corner for the Louisville football team. On today's episode of the show, we are identifying and discussing 5 players on the offensive side of the football that could benefit the most from a strong showing in the spring. They're on the list. There are a pair of quarterbacks, a couple of skill position players, and an offensive lineman to talk about throughout the duration of the show. Before we identify specific names, I do want to point out that this specific hypothetical, there's no right or wrong answers. It's all opinionated. And truthfully, every single player on the roster could benefit from a strong showing in the spring. But I look at these 5 players that we're going to talk about throughout the episode as the 5 that really could benefit from a strong couple weeks, a strong month throughout spring practice heading into the spring game. Starting out, we begin with the quarterback position. 2 of the 5 are quarterbacks. Those 2 you can see on the right if you're watching this on YouTube, Pierce Clarkson and Brady Allen. We had an episode a couple days ago about the key position battles heading into spring practice, and the quarterback spot was one of them, but it was more so pertaining to the backup quarterback spot. And some people looked at that episode and thought, well, it's not a guarantee that Tyler Shough is going to be the quarterback for the Cardinals in August, or QB1, I should say. And my rebuttal to that is I felt like this was always the plan all along. Louisville goes to the portal once again, gets a one-year guy that can play and lead Louisville to a ton of success while you allow Brady Allen and Pierce Clarkson, more time to develop. And ultimately, I think you go out to the portal and get a veteran guy like Tyler Shough to be the QB1, or at least be the theoretical QB1, because at the end of the day, it's not always set in stone. Like, you still have to go out and win the job. It can be inferred that Shough will eventually win that job and be the QB1. I think he's the penciled in starter going into spring practice, but I think it also is worth mentioning that it still is a competition. And you can look at this 2 different ways. Number one, those reps will be key for their development. Clarkson and Allen have a ton to benefit in the spring as it relates to the backup quarterback position. But also, if you want to go a little bit further, you could say, well, a solid spring could make the starting quarterback decision a little bit more confusing. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, but I'm also not saying that that's not going to be the case, because as talented as I believe Shough to be, I think that if he's healthy, I think he is a better quarterback than Jack Plummer, but that has been sort of the main storyline throughout the past couple seasons for the Texas Tech transfer, is being able to stay healthy. He just really hasn't been able to do so. Now, I understand that the injuries more so point to pretty bad injury luck rather than recurring issues like tendons or joints, but still, injuries are injuries, unfortunately. And assuming that Tyler Shough can stay healthy, there's still going to be a competition. And I look at the offensive side of the ball, and you could go to a couple of different players and say, this guy has the most to benefit from the spring. This guy has the most to benefit from the spring. If you don't include Pierce Clarkson and Brady Allen on that list, I feel like I don't know. I feel like you can't put a list out of top 5 players that can benefit from the spring without putting these two guys on the list because of the implications it could have on the quarterback position for the Cardinals heading into the summer, heading into fall camp, heading into that season opener against Austin Peay. Clarkson and Allen didn't really play much last year at all. They got, I think it was one drive each against Murray State. Brady Allen had one pass for 7 yards in that game against Murray State, and Pierce Clarkson was 1 of 2 for 7 yards and had a carry for 3 yards. Obviously, both of those coming against the Racers in the home opener this past year. And then after that, Brock Dome and Evan Conley got the work of the backup quarterback position throughout the duration of the season. But both of those guys are gone, and now theoretically it goes to Clarkson and Allen. I guess you technically could say Harrison Bailey could be thrown into the mix. I think that, the talent is there with Bailey, but I think he's probably behind Clarkson and Allen up until this point. But think about it. With a solid amount of reps, you have another year of college football under your belt. This is the second year for Pierce Clarkson, third year for Brady Allen. Clarkson, worth noting, Clarkson spent most of the spring last season dealing with an injury that he sustained before spring ball. So he didn't really get the luxury of getting those reps in March, April last season. Now you do. Now you get the opportunity to go through those reps, build the camaraderie with the new guys at wide receiver, the new guys at tight end, the new running backs, the new offensive linemen. Because as good as I feel this offensive unit can be, it's still a matter of meshing together, building that cohesiveness as a unit, and getting comfortable with playing with each other. So Clarkson and Allen begin this hypothetical debate because of the opportunity ahead of both of them. I think most of the debate is centered around the backup quarterback spot, and that is a pretty solid thing to talk about because it's been a focal point of the offseason, because even before the Cardinals went out to the portal, there's a good amount of this fan base that said, well, why not go with Pierce Clarkson? Why not go with Brady Allen? See what you've got with the younger guys ahead of spring ball before you go out to the portal. Two things can be true at one time. I think that Tyler Shough is the penciled-in QB1 heading into the spring, but also the young guys will have their opportunities to overtake Shough and be the starter. Two things can be true at one time. They're not mutually exclusive. I think that those two things are true at the same time. So now you get a chance to essentially test that theory. You get a chance to see what Clarkson, see what Allen bring to the table. Can they take the QB1 job? Because at the end of the day, it's all about competing. And you would infer that Tyler Shough could be the QB1, but technically it's not set in stone. So I guess there is an opportunity, or there is a possibility, that if one of the younger quarterbacks absolutely shows out in the spring, well, it leads to a more important decision, a more stressful decision, because of the opportunities that you have. And then obviously then your eyes turn to fall camp as you prepare for that opening game against Austin Peay. And who knows, one thing leads to another, and you may be playing multiple quarterbacks against the Governors in that opening game on August 31st. But like I said, we might be getting a little bit too ahead of ourselves at the moment. I say all that to say this: the competition, it's there. The opportunities are going to be there to compete for the reps. Now, how much we're going to theoretically learn in spring practice, that is to be seen. How good are these guys going to look in the spring game? How well are they going to take this opportunity? That is the question. Pierce Clarkson, Brady Allen, two of the 5 players that I'm looking at on the offensive side of the football, thinking to myself, they can benefit the most with the strong showing in the spring. And maybe a strong showing, all it does is sort of make you think twice about who the QB1 is going to be. But at least you are starting that conversation to where you head into the summer, you head into fall camp, and then you have maybe more of a quarterback, more of a quarterback decision to make than you did just months ago before the spring. So Brady Allen, Pierce Clarkson, 2 of the 5 that could benefit the most from a strong showing in the spring. In the next segment, we'll talk about an underclassman at the tight end position. We'll talk about an upperclassman on the offensive line, being 2 more of the 5 that can benefit the most on the offensive side of the football in the spring. We'll identify both of those players here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. Look, Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with the code Vegas100. Some of the things I love the most about Gametime, there are last-minute tickets, flash deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. The tickets are on sale right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. The Gametime guarantee is another thing that I find very interesting. You always get the best price. If you find the best price and section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Right now, new customers get $100 off a big game ticket with the code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Gametime app. Use the code Vegas100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Also a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. 2 more players that didn't really play much in the 2023 season, but I look at as being guys that could benefit the most on the offensive side of the ball with a strong showing in the spring. Tight end Jamari Johnson, offensive lineman Austin Collins. Jamari didn't record a single catch in his freshman season with the Cardinals. Appeared mainly in that game against USC in the bowl game. And I thought he had some pretty solid snaps. He looked pretty serviceable as a blocker on the extension of the offensive line. And that was sort of a point of emphasis heading into the season, a point of concern maybe throughout the year is, well, how good of a blocker does Jamari Johnson project to be? And could that be something that holds him back from seeing the field? Well, against USC, it looked like, there was some potential that you can build off of for next season for him to be a serviceable blocker. Obviously, the skill set for Johnson is unique, being 6'5", 265 pounds, played multiple positions in high school, quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, you name it. Worth noting that a couple of top programs actually recruited him to play offensive line. Louisville saw Johnson and projected him as a tight end. And he's been a name that has sort of got lost in the tight end discussions of the offseason. And that's more so an indication of the room upgrading with Mark Redmond from San Diego State, Jaleel Skinner from Miami, Isaiah Cummings from Kentucky, Dylan Mesman, the 4-star tight end from Michigan, is joining the fold. Nate Kariski is back. The tight end position is more crowded than it was a year ago. Johnson didn't really play much as a freshman, even in a room that lacked the depth. But now when you have the depth, it sort of seems like there's going to be a couple players that are left on the outside looking in. And I think a strong showing in the spring from Jamari could make this a very interesting conversation at the tight end position. Excuse me. Mark Redmond, I believe, is not going to be. I don't think Mark Redmond is going to be on campus in the spring. And I'm actually working to confirm that at the moment. But Mark Redmond is probably the projected starter at the tight end spot. One of the best tight ends in the country for San Diego State the past couple of seasons. And ultimately, I think that's going to be the same thing, heading into this year. You have two players that are probably better in terms of receiving than blocking. That's Isaiah Cummings and Jaleel Skinner. There's a ton of potential there with both of those guys. Excuse me. Power 5 guys that will be able to, leave some sort of an impact on the team. Yes, it's confirmed that Mark Redmond likely probably won't be on campus for spring ball. He will join the team heading into the summer, heading into fall camp. So more opportunity for Johnson to show that he has grown as a blocker and has developed as a pass catcher. I think the talent is there. Unfortunately, right now, there's only so many targets that are going to be available. I understand that Jeff Brom is a coach that utilizes, 2 tight end sets. And ultimately, it feels like if tight ends struggle to block, that there's not going to be much of an opportunity for them in Jeff Brom's system. It'll be interesting to see what the role is going to be for a guy like Jaleel Skinner, for a guy like Isaiah Cummings, 2 players that are, potential flex tight ends that are utilized more in the passing game rather than blocking. Jamari Johnson having more size. You wonder if he's going to be more so used as a traditional tight end rather than a flex because of, the rare mix of size and speed and athleticism. And Johnson is the player at the tight end spot that I feel like could really benefit from a strong spring, because right now the reps or the targets are up in the air. It's any man's job to lose or win, and going to be a great competition that I'm really looking forward to heading throughout spring. And if he has a solid spring, it could really build momentum moving into the remainder of the offseason and allowing him to see some more playing time carved out for his redshirt freshman year. So Jamari Johnson, the third player on the offense to benefit the most in the spring. Austin Collins, a veteran redshirt junior from Perrysburg, Ohio, has played backup to Bryan Hudson the past couple seasons. Recruited to Louisville as an interior offensive lineman, made his way over to the center position. I believe, he could play multiple spots. He's done that here at Louisville, but he will be in the conversation at the center spot. The Cardinals went out in the portal and they got commitments from Northern Illinois' Pete Nigra, Ohio State's Vic Cutler. Both can play the center spot. I think it's sort of 50-50. People have projected either Nigra or Collins to be the starting center, but I think Collins, a player that is sort of being overlooked as we talk about the offensive line next offseason, could really benefit from a strong showing in the spring. Now, it is spring ball. There's only so much opportunity, for the offensive line to be able to truly get to a spot to where the 2 deep, the depth chart, but the center position is extremely critical to be able to make the right decision on. And I think that, Collins, with a solid showing through spring practice, especially at the spring game, could work wonders for, his playing time in 2024. Replacing Bryan Hudson, a multiple-year starter, multiple-year all-ACC guy at the center position, it's so much easier said than done. And I think that Collins, you could look at a couple of offensive or players on the offensive line and say that, this guy could benefit the most. This guy could benefit the most. That guy could definitely benefit the most. I think you could go a couple different ways. I think that, you sort of have your left tackle right now in Monroe Mills. The next most important spot on the offensive line is the center position. And I think Austin Collins, player that has spent multiple years with this team in this program, could really benefit from a strong showing in the spring. 4 players down, 1 player to go. This is a guy that I was extremely high on through the second half of the season because I felt like with more opportunities, he could be a star in this offense. We'll talk about who that is in the final segment of the show after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL Conference Championships are coming up very soon, but there's no better time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab. You can find the best way to get popular parlays in the Parlay Hub and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. The player that I was referring to right before break, the one that I said I really felt like had the potential to be a star in 2024, was running back Maurice Turner. Maurice Turner is the final of the 5 offensive players that we're going to talk about today that could benefit the most from a strong showing in the spring. Turner, once again, I feel like is getting overlooked when we discuss the running back room for the Cardinals next year. Last year, heading into the year, Jawar Jordan was the projected starter. I felt like Isaac Guerendo and Maurice Turner could split carries for the Cardinals behind Jordan, and they did. I didn't think that Guerendo was going to see the majority of the backup workload, but he ended up getting that opportunity, and he made the most out of it. Was one of, if not the best player on the offensive side of the ball in the last 6 games of the season. Had a couple of performances that flat out won the Cardinals a couple games. So Jordan and Guerendo were gone. Maurice Turner entering into his 3rd season with the program, and it's pretty interesting because now, he will be in his junior year. The 5'10" native of Georgia is a guy that will be overlooked because you went out and you got Peny Boone from the portal from Toledo, Don Chaney Jr. from Miami. I'm not necessarily worried about him losing his spot to Kewan Brown or the 2 4-star running backs coming in, Isaac Brown or Duke Watson, and that's no disrespect to either of those 3. I think that Maurice Turner is just in a spot to be able to produce more this season. But when you talk about the discussion of where the workload is going to be divvied up between, the carries are going to be split up. Most people talk about Baby Bus being the starter, Don Chaney being the second man behind him, and Maurice Turner being that change of pace, 3rd down back that we saw, him in the role in this year. I think with a strong spring, you could sort of reset that debate and talk about, at the very least, Turner being a backup to Peny Boone, because I don't think you go out and you get a guy like Peny Boone, who was the MAC Offense Player of the Year, 1,400 yards from Toledo this past season, and talk about him as a backup. I don't think you go and get him to be a backup. But I also think that Maurice Turner has a great opportunity here in the spring to show that, hey, look, I know you went out and you got guys in the portal, but I'm still the real deal. All I was waiting for is an opportunity to showcase that. And ultimately, you give me the opportunity, and I'm going to make the most of it. So sort of like, we've seen a couple players throughout the past couple seasons. Last year, it was Isaac Guerendo making the most of his opportunity. The year before that, it was Jawar Jordan making the most out of his opportunity. I feel like Maurice Turner could be in that same group heading into the fall because of, you have the talent there. Maurice Turner, I feel like I'm not necessarily so sure that he's going to be the feature back. I think that he has the skill set to ultimately be the feature back. I think he's that good. And I've said that, I'm one of the larger advocates for Maurice Turner to get more opportunities because I think that he's a guy that runs extremely hard, makes the most out of his opportunities. And when he touches the ball, usually good things happen. He reminds me somewhat of Kansas City running back Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco is a guy that runs extremely hard. He makes the most out of every opportunity. And when he touches the ball, you have to essentially bring him down quickly because if not, those legs are going to keep churning and he's going to run full steam trying to, get through the hole and, make some big things happen. Maurice Turner has those same characteristics. And I think that bodes well for, his future in college. But this is his junior year. And you're looking at a season to where, I think the Cardinals are going to throw the ball more. I think that Tyler Shough is going to run the ball more than Plummer did. He's going to be more involved in the RPOs. And that's going to take away some of the carry opportunities for the running backs committee. So last year, you were able to sort of rotate 3 guys in, and they all got significant carries. I'm not necessarily so sure that you're going to be able to do that in that capacity heading into 2024 because of the personnel that you have on offense. So ultimately, it's all going to come down to, who separates themselves in the offseason. I think all the running backs are going to be on campus outside of Duke. And part of this, I mentioned that we're not talking about Maurice Turner enough. And I feel like part of that probably is my fault because we talked a lot about Baby Bus. We talked a lot about Don Chaney Jr. And I think it's going to be a backfield like it was in 2020, 2021. 2021 you had, and 2022 as well, Jalen Mitchell, Tyon Evans, Travion Cooley, Jawar Jordan, 4 guys that really could hurt a defense if you put them in. It's all going to be about matchups and guys staying healthy. I think Maurice Turner is sort of in that same spot that, Travion Cooley and Jawar Jordan were when the team had, Jalen Mitchell, Tyon Evans, Hassan Hall in 2021. So Turner is the 5th player in this hypothetical debate that could benefit the most in the spring with a strong showing because it could reiterate and, go a long way in terms of what the depth chart could look like. It could reiterate that he's essentially saying, hey, look, I didn't go anywhere. I'm still here. I've waited my turn, and I'm going to make the most out of my opportunities. So it does help that he knows this playbook, obviously more so than Chaney and Baby Bus do at this point because he has been in the Brom offense for a year, and I'm extremely excited to see what he can do in the spring. But make no mistake about it, these are not the only 5 guys that could benefit a ton from a strong showing in the spring. You could pretty much say every player on the team could benefit. What I want to know from you all, who do you feel like could benefit the most from a strong showing in the spring on the offensive side of the ball? The next episode of the show will do the same hypothetical debate, but on the defensive side of the football. So with that said, that's going to wrap up today's episode of the Locked On Global Podcast. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here